In a previous video, I shared with you how my own parents erased my identity. They gave me an English name, they didn't teach me their language or Christian values just for me to fit in. And well, let's say if you're a white dude coming from the north of England and you've been looking for jobs in the south, have you ever had to change the way you speak, the way you look, or the way you behave just to fit in? And sacrificing your ethics, your values, your morals, just to be accepted. If so, you may have experienced one form of colonization. And that's because from an occupation of lands, colonization has become an occupation of the minds and an occupation of beings. Hello and welcome. My name is William and I am a researcher in sociology at the University of Warwick in the UK. And this is a video series around my latest book, Muslims in the Neoliberal Empire, which is about how the society colonizes us and what we can do about it. And this is chapter 1, Hair Straighteners, how the empire pushes us to conform. So before talking about decolonizing anything, we need to understand what is colonization in the first place and how it has evolved since 1492, the date at which historians agree is the start of the European colonial project. These giant sequoias are not native to the UK, and although they didn't come from India, Asia, they come from North America, it is a testimony of how the mentality of people at the time saying that, oh, they look really nice, shall we bring them over here? And curiously, you have the exact same display in France. Coloniality is a global matrix of power still emanating from the former centers of power that emerged during the slave trade, the Atlantic slave trade. And they operate through various means, through military control, which is imperialism. They operate through macro structures, nation state, law, policies, the economic system. They operate through disciplinary control, administration, law enforcement, labor, hegemonic control, which is media, culture, worldviews, and technology as well, interpersonal dimensions like individual experiences, relationships, sexuality, reproduction, family structures. The development and expansion of colonialism, which started with the invasion of what has become known as the America, has affected durably the thought, the behavior, and the lives of colonized people. Not only that, but the way they acquire knowledge, the way they understand their history, the way they define themselves. The erosion of social bonds, beliefs, values, identities of colonized people was achieved through different colonial agents, which were anthropologists, missionaries, medical doctors, journalists, but also local agents educated through the colonial schools. And all of these agents would validate the European monopoly on power, knowledge and truth. And this is how something that started with the occupation of lands evolved into an occupation of beings that left long-lasting political, social, economic, cultural, intellectual legacies. And all of this kept alive the European hegemony. And although the 20th century saw the fall of geographic empires, which birthed the term post-colonialism, or post-colonial, what happened is that local elites inherited the power, there was a power vacuum, but instead of serving their own people, they got to exploit them, which made some researchers coin the term neo-colonialism. And this is a first reason why many object the use of the term post-colonialism or post-colonial. They argue that colonialism hasn't disappeared, it has just taken a different shape. People think that, colonization is only about the occupation of land, but, well, you can look at concepts from different perspectives. It doesn't have to be only what you see in the dictionary. And this is why, for the purposes of my work in this video, argue colonization is and never was about the sole occupation of lands. Back in the days, Fanon and Memi operated clear distinctions between the colonizer and the colonized. But in this post-9/11 era of globalized, uniform financial, education, healthcare and cultural systems, Bulhan argued that no, this distinction is no longer possible. So Hussein Bulhan looks at the adoption, the literal copy-paste of Eurocentric models of healthcare in Sudan, which were completely disconnected from the needs of the people and the local context. And seeing that, the Sudanese, nobody forced them to adopt this system, but still they did. They literally, by themselves, adopted this very inadequate Eurocentric system. And this is what he calls metacolonization. So how can we define this more precisely? And the problem is that these standards are not imposed by Europe, the US, or any law or any army. People impose them on themselves. So if we try to refine the definition of metacolonialism, metacolonialism is a form of colonization that is not imposed on people, but is a set of strongly suggested social, political, economic, cultural conventions that people have first to adopt if they want to be perceived as legitimate in a given society, and second, it leaves no space to individual, local, cultural, social, economic, political identities or uniqueness. You have to abide by the system, you need to conform. So it is a culture of conformation that leaves identities redundant unless you commodify them, unless you make money out of them. People have to change to be valid, they have to sacrifice who they are, their morals, their values, their ethics, and if not, they will miss out. Job opportunities, networks, many other things. Human rights. And because we're talking about things such as economics, culture, identity, empires of today are not local and tangible anymore. You cannot see them or touch them in a way. They have become global, immaterial, conceptual, and even virtual. So while back then you had things such as the British Empire, the Spanish Empire, the French Empire, the empires have become hegemonies. They are not defined by geographies, but they are defined by the different systems of domination. It's supposed to be spring, but it's super windy. So when we talk about hegemonies, we talk about things such as the neoliberal economy, we talk about things such as Eurocentric beauty standards, Eurocentric school system and curricula, white supremacy, misogyny, or modernity. Modernity was never the opposite of tradition. Modernity is a culture of separation, thinking that we humans are separate from the natural environment, that we don't belong to the global ecosystem. Modernity is things such as parents cannot live with grandparents, or that religion should be kept in private and shouldn't be shown in public or have social impact. That's modernity. Hegemonies divide people to control them. They divide people into categories and they create hierarchies. And this, according to race, ethnicity, gender, spiritual, age, ableist, social and economic, and even ecological hierarchies. But this, with the racism as a structuring principle, meaning that in any case, the white male who is Christian or agnostic will always be at the top. But more concerning, it can turn historically oppressed people into oppressors. So one thing that always makes me laugh is the anti-Polish sentiment displayed by so many British South Asian Muslims in the years leading up to the Brexit referendum. And it even happened to me. So, when people think I'm French, they're like, okay, because, I have a French passport, I have a French accent, I spent 26 years of my life in France. But when they hear that my parents are Polish, their reaction changes completely. I mean, the story, I was denied jobs, I was denied marriage opportunities, and even my own father-in-law said that I was like all these dirty immigrants who build dodgy driveways and run away with the money, despite me having a PhD and no experience in driveway building. So this is an illustration of how people who were historically at the receiving end of racism and discrimination are perpetrating the very same kind of abuse they were receiving on other people. And even if these people, like Polish people, are white, European, Christian, and legally in the UK. But the curious thing is that you would never find this anti-Polish sentiment if you go to Pakistan, North India, Bangladesh. It is something specific to British Muslims in the UK and England, to be even more specific. So Paulo Freire gives us an explanation of this phenomenon of metacolonialism. He doesn't use the word metacolonialism, but he says it is when the oppressed have internalized the image of the oppressor and have adopted his guidelines. So for example, it is when in the UK, Home Secretary Suella Braverman declared that multiculturalism has failed, while herself, she is the daughter of South Asian immigrants. She's married to a Jewish husband and was serving under a Hindu prime minister. But yeah, multiculturalism has failed. What put her in this position in the first place? It is when ethnically minoritized people appropriate pro-white narratives such as, taking back our borders, make America white again, and this kind of things. But the amazing thing that we will see in the next videos is that metacolonialism has merged the best of authoritarian repression, think Orwell 1984, and softer measures of control in the guise of aspiration, entertainment, and think Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. So it's basically like an Orwellian, Huxleyan double punch at the same time, and more pervasive because we always think of colonization like north, south, east and west. But metacolonialism has contaminated the very Eurocentric structures it emanates from. Think about all of our education system. How many things have been contaminated by, let's say, neoliberal ideas? Think about a very basic example. In sociology, why instead of networks, we now say social capital? Where does this idea come from? Who tells us that the way we read Shakespeare or Molière is faithful to the way it was supposed to be read back then? Or we read history, the archival material, the way it was supposed to be read? And that we are not contaminated by modern ideas. So what can we do? The first thing I would say is to be aware and ask ourselves questions. Are the choices we make really ours? Are the things we like in life, we aspire to, are really ours? Or are we just following what everyone else is doing? Or following what some figures of authority say that we should be doing? It's hidden in the simple things. All of my life I've been using disposable tissues. Again, colonization of the environment. But until recently, through some events, I realized that you have reusable tissues made of cotton. And it sounds stupid, but that was a way of me realizing that, we've got alternatives. And actually, they're super absorbent. That's insane. How can I have ignored the existence of reusable tissues all this time? It's just crazy. It's about asking ourselves the intention behind the creation of the things we are using, with the things we are consuming, and the consequences of their consumption. How many companies have developed alternatives, ethical alternatives to Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola? There is always a different option, and if it doesn't exist, we can create it. So continuing in chapter 1, the next videos will be about what is a diaspora. We'll talk about the different ways of people losing their cultures, their ethics, their morals, their value. What is de-diasporization, westernization? How do you call this? What's the difference? So if you want to dive deeper into the contents and the concepts around this research, I invite you to subscribe to the newsletter, and I'll be advertising in-person events in France, the US, and the UK, but also online events, so we can have more interactive conversations. So I hope it was useful. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, take care of yourselves and each other. The sun is out and I can see the first flowers, although it's not yet the equinox. Spring is right around the corner. That's lovely.